All right, hey everyone. So I call the first meeting of the 13th Undergraduate Senate to order. So we have, I'm Stephanie. I'm the chair of the Judicial Board. Taylor's out of town, so I'm the next best thing. So we will now start with presenting the senators for the class of, let's see. We'll start with campus at large. You guys want to just stand if their names are called? Yeah. I apologize if I mispronounce your name, but I'll get there. So Joshua Dantzler, Noor Hanoush, you can correct me too. Saram Hawk, Yasaman Hakami.
It's Yasaman Hakami, but it's okay.
Okay, I'm so sorry. We'll get there. Sophia Pintar. And these are your senators for the campus at large. We will now present the senators for the class of 2021. Please stand when your name is called. Danya Adams. Yeah, no, she's at it. Okay, she rejected. Luan Burgess. Sorry. Angela Chen, Tanner Meacham, and Andrew Polinsky. We'll now present the senators for the class of 2020. Eric Fryer, Thomas Kenna, Ben Koshvin, Jeffrey Martin, and Leela Nicole. Senators for class of 2020. We'll now present the senators for the class of 2019. Madison Morrow, Jason Tano Miha, and Bobby Zitzman. And we now present the senators for the class of 2018. Isaiah Beaton and Dara Nayar. We'll now present the senators for the School of International Service. Rowan Adepa. The senator for the School of Communication, Haley Howard.
Hallie.
And presenting the senator for the School of Public Affairs, Nancy Loguidis. Thank you all. So now we're going to do the swearing in of the senators-elect. Okay. So if the senators for the campus at large will please come down to the front.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So please raise your right hands. I state your name. Do solemnly swear.
I, Sophia Pintar, do solemnly swear
that I will diligently and faithfully execute the duties and responsibilities of the office of Senator for the campus at large.
That
I will abide by the governing documents of the student government. And that I will work to my fullest abilities. to promote the interests and welfare
to promote the interests and welfare
of the students of American University.
of the students of American University.
All right, if the senators from the class of 2021 will please come down. All right. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name, do solemnly swear
I, Andrew Jones, do solemnly swear
that I will diligently and faithfully
that I will diligently and faithfully
execute the duties and responsibilities
execute the duties and responsibilities
of the office of Senator for the class of 2021,
of the office of Senator for the class of 2021,
that I will abide by the governing documents
that I will abide by the governing documents
of the student government,
of the student government,
and that I will work to my fullest abilities
and that I will work to my fullest abilities
to promote the interests and welfare
to promote the interests and welfare
of the students of American University.
of the students of American University.
The senators for the class of 2020 will please come to the front. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name, do solemnly swear
I, Thomas Simon, do solemnly swear
that I will diligently and faithfully
that I will diligently and faithfully
execute the duties and responsibilities
execute the duties and responsibilities
of the office of Senator for the class of 2020,
of the office of the Senator for the class of 2020,
that I will abide by the governing documents
that I will abide by the governing documents
of the student government,
of the student government,
and that I will work to my fullest abilities
that I will work to my fullest abilities
to promote the interests and welfare
to promote the interests and welfare
of the students of American University.
of the students of American University.
The senators for the class of 2019 will please come to the front. Senator. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name, do solemnly swear
I, Bobby Sitzman, do solemnly swear
that I will diligently and faithfully
that I will diligently and faithfully
execute the duties and responsibilities
execute the duties and responsibilities
of the office of Senator for the class of 2019,
of the office of Senator for the class of 2019.
that I will abide by the governing documents
I will abide by the governing documents
of the student government,
of the student government,
that I will work to my fullest abilities
and that I will work to my fullest ability
to promote the interests and welfare
to promote the interest and welfare
of the students of American University.
of the students of American University.
Senators for the class of 2018. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name, do solemnly swear
I,
Dara Nayar, do solemnly swear that I will diligently and faithfully execute the duties and responsibilities
execute the duties and responsibilities
of the office of Senator for the class of 2018,
of the office of Senator for the class of 2018,
that I will abide by the governing documents
That I will abide by the governing documents
of the student government,
of the student government,
and that I will work to my fullest abilities
and that I will work to my fullest abilities
to promote the interests and welfare
to promote the interests and welfare
of the students of American University.
of the students of American University.
If the Senator for the School's International Service will please come to the front. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name, do solemnly swear
I, Rowan McDuffett, do solemnly swear
that I will diligently and faithfully
that I will diligently and faithfully
execute the duties and responsibilities of the office of Senator for the School of International Service,
for the office of Senator for the School of International Service,
that I will abide by the governing documents
that I will abide by the governing documents
of the student government,
of the student government,
and that I will work to my fullest abilities
and that I will work to my fullest abilities
to promote the interests and welfare
to promote the interests and welfare
of the students of American
of the
University.
students of American University.
All right, if the senator for the school communication will please come to the front. And Hallie, right? And Maria. All right, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name, do solemnly swear
I, Hallie Howard, do solemnly swear
that I will diligently and faithfully
that I will diligently and faithfully
execute the duties and responsibilities
execute the duties and responsibilities
of the office of Senator to the School of Communication,
as the Senator to the School of Communication,
that I will abide by the governing documents
that I will abide by the governing documents
of the student government,
of the student government,
and that I will work to my fullest abilities
and that I will work to my fullest abilities
to promote the interests and welfare
to promote the interests and welfare
of the students of American University.
of the students of American University.
And finally, the Senator for the School of Public Affairs, can you please come to the front? All right, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name, do solemnly swear
I, Nancy LaJuicy, do solemnly swear
that I will diligently and faithfully
that I will diligently and faithfully
execute the duties and responsibilities
execute the duties and responsibilities
of the office of Senator for the School of Public Affairs,
of the office of Senator for the School of Public Affairs,
that I will abide by the governing documents
that I will abide by the governing documents
of the student government,
of the student government,
and that I will work to my fullest abilities
and I will work to my fullest abilities
to promote the interests and welfare
to promote the interest and welfare
of the students of American University.
of the students of American University.
Alright, so now, congratulations to all the new senators. Alright, we are now going to proceed with roll call. So, are you doing that or?
You can just read the names that.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna learn. Joshua Dantzler,
Here.
Noor Hanush. If you'll, sorry.
Yeah, will you sit here, please?
If you say here, just something verbal, please. Saram Haq.
Here.
Yasmin Hakami.
Here.
Sophia Kinsar.
Here.
Danya Adams. Luan Burgess.
Here.
Angela Chen.
Here.
Tanner Meacham.
Here.
Andrew Polinsky.
Here.
Eric Fryer. Thomas Kenna.
Here.
Ben Koshman.
Here.
Jeffrey Martine.
Here.
Leela Najafi.
Here.
My apologies. Madison Morrow. Jason Tanomesia. Bobby Zitzman.
Here.
Isaiah Beaton.
Present.
Dara Nayar.
Here.
Rowan Abdefa.
Here.
Hallie Howard.
Here.
Nancy Lokutis.
Here.
Alright. Again, I apologize for my pronunciation, everyone. So we will now move to a period of public comment. Does any member of the public wish to speak at this time?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Joyce DeSosa, President of the Abramson Institute, and I'm just rising to congratulate all of the newly sworn in senators and wish them a wonderful, productive 13th Undergraduate Senate. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Does any other member of the public wish to speak at this time? Okay. All right.
Okay, I have slides.
Okay.
This meeting is weird. The executives can't present, so I just wanted to give you a quick overview. Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Schneider. I've met some of you. I'm the Secretary of Student Government. I was elected in March along with Taylor, Christine, and Solomon. I function as the Chief Communicator of Student Government. I handle everything from social media to press releases, to emails to students, as well as outreach to other student organizations and recruitment. I joined student government in my freshman year in October. I had applied to KPU over the summer. Didn't get that, but I met the awesome secretary at the time, and I've never looked back. This has been a fundamental part of my life here at AU. For the freshmen in the room, I hope it can be for you as well. AUSG has given me a lot, and I put a lot into it. So here I am. I'm just going to briefly touch on what I campaigned on and what I'm working on now. So I campaigned on accessibility. Our programming is not always accessible to students who need accommodations. And that's for a number of reasons. That's because we don't standardize how we deal with accessibility requests. There's no standard way to request them. You can request them either through AUSG or through ASAC. So I'm working on producing a report to come out by the beginning of the spring semester with recommendations on how we can improve that, whether it be through a standardized form or working more closely with ASAC to make sure that they can fully fund requests for our programming. Accountability. I'm working on the first ever accountability report for the AUSG Executive Board. I campaigned on making this a monthly report. Once the first one comes out by November 22nd, it will become monthly. And this will cover, it'll basically be like a platform check-in. I've had the AUSG executives, including myself, submit their platforms that they ran on in spring elections to me. And I'm currently reviewing those and reviewing the work that we've done as a board, collectively and as individuals. And I'll be producing that report in the coming weeks. And then it'll become monthly. Working with other umbrella organizations such as AUCC, Student Media, and the Residents Association with our esteemed president, Sam Rogers. I'll be touching on a project in a moment that Sam and I are working on right now. And our bond with Student Media has never been closer. I'm in constant communication with Student Media co-chairs to ensure that any issues that arise are taken care of swiftly and professionally, and to ensure that we're keeping them in the loop and that we're giving them the best communications possible so that they can do the best work that they can produce. Communicating for clubs. A huge part of my campaign and how I believe AUSG should function at American University was influenced by my peers in other clubs and organizations who came to me and told me that they have no way to communicate with the larger student body. They each have their own Facebook pages and groups and listservs, but there's no way to reach the wider student body. AUSG is the only campus organization that has access to the school-wide listserv. So I've already partnered with clubs like No Lost Generation, Muslim Student Association, Caribbean Circle, and others to get the word out about events and initiatives. And I'm excited to continue that work. In the coming days, I'll be reaching out to the student body to ask students, most importantly, student leaders that lead clubs, lead communications for their clubs, to submit events on campus that matter to them via the AUSG calendar. Our email listserv is available for any club event that we decide to co-sponsor, either in a monetary or marketing capacity. And in terms of co-sponsoring for a marketing capacity, that doesn't include like the contour allocating money. That's just me saying, oh yeah, we'll share that on Facebook or we'll send out an email. I also campaigned on this thing called SG Listens, one of the most important parts of my campaign in the spring. It's my commitment to improving our everyday outreach to students. I'm putting the finishing touches on a plan to launch in the spring that will involve everyone from the e-board to department directors to senators themselves. The concept of this is to have tabling on a regular basis, other just kind of one-off outreach events that don't have to, they don't involve a lot of students, but just to say, we're here. If you have any concerns, let us know. If you want to work on something, let us know. Kind of breaking down barriers, if you will. My commitment to you. Most importantly, that I'm present. If you ever need anything, AUSG related or not, I'm here. I'm reachable in person or via any communication method you could possibly think of. Contact info is going to be on the last slide. Yeah, if I'm not here, I'm at my internship and I can take your calls. And then back to that project I mentioned before with RHA. Freshmen, if you don't know, other students, if you don't know, all Aramark locations close from Wednesday to Saturday during Thanksgiving week. And that is a huge hardship to students that decide to stay on campus during Thanksgiving break, whether it's for affordability reasons in terms of like, you can't afford to go home, or just that you're deciding not to go home for Thanksgiving for whatever reason. You shouldn't have to go out and pay out of pocket for 5, 6, 7 meals over that 4-day period. So we're working on funding a pilot project with 4 to 5 Tenleytown businesses. It'd basically be a voucher program. We would give vouchers to students. We haven't determined how many yet. We would give vouchers to students that decide to stay, probably through RAs, et cetera. And those are going to be valid for specific meals at participating businesses. And then AUSG and RHA, we're still working on funding, would be picking up the tab. So like, for example, Burger Tap and Shake is already tentatively committed, provided that we move forward with the program. So they're $7 chuck. They're going to offer a discount to RHA and AUSG for $5. And if a student goes to them with a voucher, they'll keep the voucher, and at the end of the 4-day period, they'll tally it up and send us an invoice for however much that costs. And I'm working with SA, RHA, and SG to lock down funding, and I'll update you next week. Contact me. Email, phone, Twitter DM, Facebook Messenger, Snapchat, I guess. And if you use something else, let me know because I'm a big fan of communicating. Thank you, everyone.
Is there any more public comment? Comment from the public? All right, we will now move to the report from the president. Will Andrew James Loretti, President Thompson's proxy for this meeting, please come down and speak?
Hi, everyone. President Thompson reports, good morning, Senators, and congratulations to the newly elected members of the 13th Undergraduate Senate. I wish I could be there as speaker for a day, but I'm currently on my way to San Francisco to serve as a panelist in the Anti-Defamation League's Never Is Now conference to talk about countering hatred and rising extremism on college campuses. I'm sure Stephanie will do a great job as you all elect the speaker for the Senate. It was a joy working with Maddie in the 12th Senate, and I look forward to working with the 13th Senate and its next speaker. As this is the first meeting of the 13th Undergraduate Senate, I want to provide a brief overview of what I've done so far as president and the projects the members of my cabinet have been working on over this semester. First, I have submitted written statements and testified before 3 congressional hearings to discuss campus climate and free speech on college campuses. We have collaborated and put on Enough is Enough, a rally against terror with Professor Kendi and the Anti-Racist Research and Policy Center in responses to the recent bias-related incidents that occurred earlier in the semester. We have worked with the university to release, in part, the most recent campus climate survey data. The information has not been shared publicly with students in almost 2 decades. We have worked with the Office of Campus Life to create a space for multicultural celebration and collaboration called Home, the hub for organizing multiculturalism and equity, which, fingers crossed, will open this week. The room is on the 3rd floor of the Mary Graydon Center. Collectively, we have attended dozens of events across the AU community to serve as ambassadors of AUSG and stay up to date with the needs of our constituents. We are currently working on a series of forums hosted by the directors during a week to focus on specific themes under the areas of inclusion, transparency, accountability, support, and accessibility. The executive board will be attending the November meeting of the Board of Trustees this week and will participate in committee and full board conversations. For my board report, I listed the following areas as high priorities for the next quarter. Campus climate survey, asking for an annual survey and full report. Safety and support, with a focus on community policing and exploring the differences between community police interactions. Increasing support of minority students and cultural competency module. And this concludes President Thompson's report.
We will now move to the election of the Speaker of the Undergraduate Senate. The floor is now open for nominations for Speaker.
I nominate Maddie Wheeler.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any more nominations?
For the name to ask if the nominee passes.
Oh, does the nominee accept?
Yes.
She's the boss.
I nominate Trevor Pugh.
Is there a second?
Second.
Does the nominee accept?
I accept.
Are there any more nominations?
I move to nominate Joyce DeSers.
Are there any seconds?
Second.
Does the nominee accept?
Yep.
Are there any more nominations? Alright. Okay,
Like if there are no further nominations, the floor is now closed.
okay. So there are no more nominations. The floor is now closed. We'll move to candidate speeches without objection. Let's see, will Joyce,
Or you do them in order of nomination. So like it'll be each.
okay, so the three of them leave first, right?
You can ask them to leave, they don't have to leave.
Oh.
So like while one candidate speaks, the other two may leave if they wish to.
Okay,
And then there's questions.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Okay, well, Maddie Wheeler, please come speak.
Yeah.
I apologize.
I'm gonna grab this podium.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, I have one of my phone to use. All right, so there's going to be 5 minutes for speech, followed by 5 minutes of questioning. And yeah, no executives may speak, only senators. So, whenever you're ready.
Hi, everyone. I'd first like to thank Senator Legitimacy for nominating me to be your speaker. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Maddie, and I'm the current speaker. I'd like to first tell you guys about what the speaker does and like why I have loved being speaker so far. So the speaker is an impartial chair in the Senate. A good speaker facilitates advocacy through getting speakers in touch or getting senators in touch with necessary university organs to get their advocacy goals done. The speaker does a lot of clerical work and lots of reading of the governing documents, especially the standard code of parliamentary procedure. To give you a point of reference, I spend like 8 to 10 hours a week outside of this meeting time doing work for Senate. Also of note, I'm the 22nd speaker and only the second woman to serve in this role throughout our 13 Senates. So the consistent change in leadership and the consistency that it's always been a man who does this job was definitely a problem for me, but like you guys are your own people. So I'll give you guys an idea of like my experience in Senate. So I joined Senate over a year ago and I served as the clerk through August when I was sworn in as speaker. It's true that I've never been a senator. I've never won a race. I've never lost a race, but I've never even ran either. So, but I actually think this is a strength of mine. So I've always been in Senate, but I've always been impartial in Senate. So serving the speaker's cabinet gave me a true insight on how to do the job well. And I've always been impartial. I've always been in an impartial leadership role, which doesn't allow anybody to know my bias on any issues. So I can and truly have been impartial. It's true that this is one of the most laborious jobs I've ever done. It takes hours per week and even more headspace. Speaker Wills, who served before me, spent so much time in the summer transitioning me, and by electing me as your speaker, he'd be cutting down on that weeks of unknown transition period. I'd also like to stress how important it is for people to be comfortable, for the speaker to be comfortable with the parliamentary procedure we use in our meetings. I've did parliamentary procedure in a couple clubs for the last 8 years, and I've run 9 Senate meetings so far, and I've also read the full 150-page book on how the standard code works. So that would cut out on time, trouble, and unknown, so that advocacy can just like start and we can like start getting your all's platforms done. Another part of being a great speaker is working with the other branches of student government and with student activities, which is the university administration that oversees student government. I have an incredibly strong working relationship with the executive board and with Cheyenne, our student activities advisor. Cheyenne and I have a weekly meeting where we discuss direction for the Senate. We're currently in the middle of planning the retreat that y'all are going to have before the end of the semester for us to gather ideas and goals. Cheyenne's an incredible resource to me and to all of you when it comes to university advocacy and the red tape that might come with it. So I understand that some concerns, that people may have about the speaker having a strong relationship with the executive branch. So I'd like to provide an example of how I stood up for Senator Voices and like remained friends with Taylor afterwards. So there was a bill in the 12th Senate 1617-023, which created the Special Committee on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And Taylor had some serious hesitations about the wording and the language of the bill. And so I told Taylor, like, you can't just veto this. You need to come to Senate and like speak and like give your voice. And she came, and there was incredibly like great collaborative discussion, and the bill passed, and everyone's happy now. And like we're gonna have this committee in the 13th Senate, which is awesome. So goals for the new Senate, I worked collaboratively with Chris in the past to update the AUSG website with all the 12 senator bios. I think this is super important for y'all too. Your bio should be on the website and your office hours. I want to increase the office hours efficiency. I did this with the 12th Senate by implementing roaming office hours around campus, and you guys should definitely have that too, to increase like transparency, accessibility, etc. I'd also like for all of us to write a policy agenda so that the students who elected y'all can keep you guys accountable for what you ran on. So like at the retreat, we'll gather together, write down our goals, I'll format it in a pretty nice Canvas presentation and put it out on the website. And I'd also like to remind you guys that I'm a resource to y'all. Like when it comes to writing a bill, I'd encourage you guys to meet with me about the best way to get your goal to its end. I'd like you guys to come to me to help me find you guys the necessary university officials that you need to meet with. I don't want your bills to just direct the members of the executive board to do your advocacy projects. You guys do have oversight over different student government organization or like organs, but I don't think you guys have that instead of advocacy power. I love Senate so much, and I'm so excited for the new Senate because you guys are filled with so much passion and drive for your advocacy projects, and you wouldn't have spent hours campaigning about it if you didn't care. And I know that oftentimes Senate has a bad reputation, but I wouldn't be standing here running again for this position to be the leader of you guys if I didn't believe in its power and if I didn't love it. So that's like super important to me. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
All right, we will now have 5 minutes of questioning. Are there any questions for the nominees?
Hi, I would actually like to see what suggestions you have for committee creations. I understand that Speaker does get to produce different types of ad hoc and just commissions and committees themselves. Do you have any ideas or?
Yeah, so the committee structure that I'm planning on implementing if I'm elected, and obviously this is not set in stone, is 3 standing committees. The first one is the Committee on Campus Climate. Second one would be Committee on Oversight, Accountability, and Transparency. Third one would be Committee on University and Student Affairs. And all of them have cool acronyms that I'm very into. So that's fun. And then ad hoc committees. I would want to do one on student government, residence hall association relationship and collaborations. I think that's super important. And then also Senator Pintar suggested an ad hoc committee on Greek life affairs. So if you guys would want to do that too, I'm super into that.
Hi, I'm going to ask all the candidates this as I'm talking to you, but could you list in order of precedence for the governing documents?
Yeah, so Constitution, bylaws, rules of debate and decorum, ethical judicial standards, past parliamentary rulings, and the standard code of parliamentary procedure.
Can you go into a little bit more detail about what the campus climate committee would get up to?
Yeah, totally. So Campus Climate Committee, the mission statement hasn't been written obviously yet, but I have a vision for it that it's stuff about like campus safety and security, accessibility issues, anything that happened with the anything that came out with the campus climate data that was recently released. Does that make sense?
So you talked a lot about like how you've helped, or you talked a little bit about how you helped to get bills out and to help, and there's a lot of new senators here who don't have this parliamentary experience. So can you talk a little bit about how you'll help all this new flood of senators get their ideas and get their bills out and make sure that they're fully implemented and that they actually help people?
So the bylaws mandate an orientation session between the first and second meetings of the new senates. Put on the clerk by the clerk, parliamentarian, and speaker. So that would definitely be happening. I would personally walk you guys through all of the parliamentary procedure. And I also even in the 12th Senate, I worked to make sure that everybody understood what was going on all the time. So I know a lot of you were at the special meeting when things were a little bit crazy. And I don't know if you remember, but I would oftentimes be like, does this make sense? Because I don't want parliamentary procedure to stick in the way of us moving forward. So definitely the orientation session, I would just explain basics of how it all works. And then also just during Senate, it'd be easy. And you get it as you go along. It's complicated in the beginning, but definitely, I also have a guidebook. And there's also one in the Senate office, there's a binder of all the stuff we did in the 12th Senate. There's a guidebook in the beginning of that I would definitely dust off and explain to everyone. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so you mentioned the special meeting. I know most of us here are new freshmen and new senators. So can you speak a little bit on that special meeting? Congratulations, by the way. But just your role in it, I guess.
Yeah, totally.
Because I think a lot of us were confused about what was going on at that time.
Yeah, totally. So I'm just the impartial chair. I just stood up here and I banged the gavel when people were talking too much, and I called on people when they wanted to speak. I had no role in anything about the business. I was very uneducated on what even happened. I learned while you guys were, or while the 12 senators were questioning the people who were standing up here with me. I was just the facilitator of the discussion, and that's what the speaker is. That's what I think a good speaker is. They're impartial. They don't try to get the senators to lean one way or the other. They step back. They just sit up here and call on people. And I think that's super key because I wasn't elected by the student body. All of you guys were. So you guys are the ones who should direct the policy and the oversight and whatever in different directions, not me. I just sit up here and call people and call me to order.
Thank you. So you just mentioned that the speaker, in your opinion, should just be sitting at the front, being impartial. Do you think that the speaker should have a proactive role when it comes to pushing a certain policy agenda for the Senate?
So in the bylaws, it does say that the speaker is the chief advocate of legislation that has passed. And I'm that's the bylaws, that's what this job should do. So if a bill gets done and it's an advocacy project, it's my then job to communicate that to the university organs. Okay.
If someone wants a motion to extend.
It's in the bylaws, it can't be extended.
Oh.
Great. We will proceed to the next candidate.
Sorry to snap at you.
No, good.
Trevor, will you please get down? How do you pronounce your last name?
Q.
Okay. I'll get it.
You're not the
Great, so
So I'm
you,
gonna leave the room.
okay,
Out of respect.
sure. So you have 5 minutes to speak, followed by 5 minutes of questioning. Start whenever you're ready.
All right, good afternoon, Madam Chair and esteemed senators. For those that don't know me, my name is Trevor Pugh. I'm a second-year student here at AU with a public health major and policy and law focus. I want to thank Senator Pintar for giving me the nomination to be able to speak in front of everyone. So I'm standing in front of you here today because I hope to be your speaker for this next session. With this new session that's coming up, it's a fresh start. It's a chance to recommit the Senate to the students in which you guys will serve for. And as your speaker, I want to work to ensure that you do just that. I want to push the 13th Undergraduate Senate to be better than its predecessor. I, like most of you here, joined the Senate as a freshman last year. And I had no experience in student government and no understanding of what the Senate could and could not do. And I wasn't alone. Many of the new senators last year had no idea what we were doing, and there was very few people to help guide us along the way. I've been in your seat, and I know firsthand what is needed from a speaker to help get you set for the role as a senator, being that you're new this year. And I know the firsthand challenges it comes to being new to the organization in general. But the speaker should embrace the responsibility of helping these senators prepare for their role. And my experience as a senator last year will help me specifically get you guys ready and provide you with the crucial foundational training you need so that you know how debate works, how legislation works, and most importantly, how to follow through with your policy ideas. Not only would I be a resource for you, but I want to be a support system that turns your ideas into reality. And it is this idea of turning your ideas into reality is why we're all here. As your speaker, I want to help create a legislative agenda so that we can bring together the major objectives that all of you proposed during your campaigns and that we can follow through throughout the year and accomplish those together. We all hold very similar beliefs, and so we should work together on those beliefs to achieve them. A legislative agenda gives us that opportunity specifically. From expanding mental health services, to demanding more action against hate crimes, to improving dining services on campus. I want to empower each and every one of you to achieve the platforms that you campaigned on. And finally give the student body a way to hold us accountable for our platform ideas. Now, if elected, my main objective as speaker is to make the 13th Undergraduate Senate more accessible and more transparent. There's an obvious disconnect between student government and the student body. I want to show that the students, we are representing them beyond this room. Senator Nikki Adeli last year sponsored Bill 1617-025, which already pushes senators to be more involved in the AU community. But I want to go above and beyond that. I want to, through town halls, roaming office hours, or just getting more involved in student activities and attending student events, we can bring the Senate to the student body. And I can help remove the barriers that it takes to achieving the true accessibility, which has plagued the Senate in the past. So I want you to consider this. Imagine student representatives being in this room, presenting the issues that matter most to them. Imagine not only drafting policy by yourself, but with the input of the students that you actually seek to help. Imagine working together as a team where our first instinct is to lift each other up and not tear each other apart. This is what I envision for the 13th Senate. I want this body to work for every single student, and it would be a privilege to be your speaker. Thank you.
Are there any questions for the candidate? Citizen?
Thank you. So you lay out a bunch of nice goals that you envision, and those are good, but I'm sure that the other two candidates also want to do all those things as well. So can you provide us any detail? You said town halls and roaming office hours were two specific things that you intend to do to achieve those goals, but do you have anything else in mind?
besides those two,
Yeah, because you have all these goals. I'm just wondering
Yeah,
whether you
yeah,
intend to do
so-
anything specific.
I ran in the race this year. And one of the biggest things I wanted to do if I was elected as senator was create this idea of the leadership and community summit, engagement summit. And what this does, it's sort of just a conference where student leaders from all organizations across campus come together and use it as a networking opportunity. Meet people of groups that are similar to yours and have the Senate there, have student government there to sort of show them like, hey, we are a resource to you. We want you to come to us for policy ideas that you want to see, and we want to come to you because we are representing you. And as the speaker, I want to help push the senators and the Senate to do that, specifically outside of being more accessible through roaming office hours or holding town halls like past legislation is like mandating us to.
Yeah, so I just because like this obviously is at the end of the day like part of like our student life and we're all students and we have other commitments. So could you just elaborate for everybody what other commitments you have and in other words just like what level of commitment you can give to this position?
Yeah, so first I wouldn't be running for this position if I didn't have the time. Outside of this, if elected, I'm a General Assembly delegate in the RHA, which takes 1 to 2 hours a week. I'm also the Vice President of Community Service for the National Society of Collegiate Scholars, which is about 1, maybe 2 hours a week, not even. And besides that, I'm ready to commit to this organization if I'm elected speaker. I mean, like I'm also committed to my boyfriend, but like he's back in Cleveland, so that doesn't really count. I think that, yeah, besides school, that's all I'm committed to.
Sorry, Hannah.
I have a two-part question for you. So the first part is, could you list in order the order of precedence for the governing documents? And after that, can you elaborate on your familiarity with the governing documents, given your experience in the Senate?
Yeah, so the order is the Constitution, the bylaws, the rules of debate and decorum, the ethical and judicial standards, the past parliamentary authority, and then the standard code. And then working last year as a senator specifically, I became very familiar with the governing documents. I served on the ad hoc committee for reviewing governing documents, so I became very familiar with that. I also have the standard code book with me that I've been reviewing and going over and preparing for. And sort of just throughout the year last year, I just came to know how debate flows in the Senate.
Oh, hi. I'm asking pretty much every single candidate this question, but what examples or kinds of commissions, committees, and ad hoc committees are you thinking about bringing about if elected?
So if elected, I'm also considering 3 standing committees, just like Maddie was proposing. So they would be campus life, a committee on campus life, committee on student services, and then committee on communications, outreach, programming, and services. Campus life sort of deals with the connection between students and student government. So anything dealing with student events, student activities, student organizations, anything along those lines. Student services would act as the connection between the administration and student government. So anything that the university offers and what kind of policy we push forward to change the university initiatives. And then the comms, outreach, programming services was actually a committee that was established 2, maybe 3 Senates ago. And I really liked it because it dealt with internal student government stuff, and it also acts as the oversight committee. Besides that, of course, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Special Committee, which I helped propose earlier this year, is going to be there, the Finance Committee. And then I think a commission on health services, specifically because public health major, I'm very interested in health. And so I would like to see a commission on that move forward. And I know a lot of people in this room ran on health services and mental health specifically, and I would really like to see that happen. The only other idea I have would be an ad hoc committee on student advocacy, which gets like focusing on like the current issues, like campus safety, getting student government more transparent with town halls, things like that.
Many of us senators were in attendance at the 12th Undergraduate Senate Special Session. And we know how vocal you were about the firing of Will as case director and was very outspoken to President Thompson. Now, if you are to be confirmed by this body to become...
Yeah, that's 5 minutes. All right, thank you.
You can ask me after.
All right, maybe please grab the
Yeah. Let me bring them.
All right, so you will have 5 minutes to speak, followed by 5 minutes of questioning. So whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you everyone here for giving me the opportunity to run. I'm Joyce DeSurse. I wear a lot of hats, but the one I am wearing today is student at American University. And I want to be your speaker. So I didn't prepare a speech, and this is why I didn't really know if I was going to run, and I kind of flip-flop back and forth. A lot of people told me, Joyce, I think you should do it. And a lot of people told me, Joyce, what are you thinking? That's a bad idea. But here we are. So what do I want to do as Speaker of the Undergraduate Senate? I want to transform the role. I think Maddie and Noah Wills have been phenomenal speakers, and I think Maddie's a great candidate, Trevor too. You'll notice that all of us wear glasses, so you know it's going to be good. And she's really done a great job. I've sat in a lot of Senate meetings, but I think that the speakership has been transformed into a really clerical role, a really administrative role. And I think we can do a lot better to advocate for senators, to give you the resources to advocate for your constituencies, to advocate for students. You may not know, in the Senate office, there is one cabinet that's full of binders from every single Senate. It has all of the documents from every student government that we've had at American University. And that's just a phenomenal resource. And not only should senators know about that, students should know about that. So I really think, obviously the speaker is an impartial officer, but they are the chief policy officer of the student government. And as a result, while the speaker is certainly impartial on substantive matters, like building a dragon on the quad, the speaker isn't impartial in making sure that the Senate works better. And that's what I want to do as speaker. I have the experience to do this. For a while, my Twitter bio read student government fanatic, and I'm partly proud of that and partly don't talk about that. But I have a lot of experience with student government. I professionally consulted to student governments, the University of North Florida and the University of Florida. And as a parliamentarian, I'm a registered parliamentarian and a member of the American Institute of Parliamentarians. I'm very familiar with how organizations work, how not-for-profits work, how governments work. And one of the really important things I think that we ought to undertake, whoever is going to have the next tenure as speaker, is revising the rules of the Senate. Because I think fundamentally, the rules should not be something that we say, well, we don't want the rules to get in the way. The rules should not be an obligation. The rules should be something we embrace, something that is going to facilitate, or more than facilitate, something that is going to really exacerbate the Senate's ability to answer to the people who elected them and to fulfill their policy goals. And I wish I had more than a minute and 30 seconds to tell you about all the rules that I want to work with you to make better, but I really think that Senate input on how the Senate works is the first step and the key step to ensuring that the Senate works best. And lastly, to take a more personal turn, I look forward to being the first trans woman to be Speaker of the Senate. I look forward to showing every student at American University, there's a place for you here. This is your student government. I look forward to being not the first, Will has been beat on that, but one of the first freshmen to be Speaker of the Senate, to show specifically the class of 2021, don't lose faith in the student government right now. It's a force for good. But above all, I really look forward to being someone you can turn to. I look forward to working with each and every one of you to make this body better. I don't want to be your leader or your director. I really would like to be a face among equals, a first among equals. I have a blueprint for an engine of change in the Senate. And I look forward to all of you scrutinizing it. And I look forward to all of us putting in a hand to help build that engine. Thank you, and I hope you have really difficult questions.
We'll move into a period of 5 minutes of questions. Vincent?
Can I get my time to say for a second?
Oh, sure.
All right. Can you elaborate on what professional consulting for student governments entails? Like, what did you do in that capacity?
Insofar as I'm allowed to disclose things by the professional standards for parliamentarians for the University of North Florida, I consulted their Senate to help them review their bylaws. Specifically, I consulted Senate leaders, the Student Senate at the University of North Florida, to help them improve how they handle their parliamentary procedure. And at the University of Florida, I helped in a 2015 election case with the University of Florida Student Supreme Court to consider a very technical question of what constitutes the 2/3 in a balanced vote.
Further questions for the candidate? Senator Kennedy?
You spoke at length about rules, and I was wondering if you could list for us the order of precedence for AUSG's governing documents.
Sure, thank you. That would be the Constitution, the bylaws, the standing rules of the Senate, the ethical and judicial standards, previous parliamentary precedent, and the standard code of parliamentary procedure.
I was wondering if you can elaborate on what kinds of committees, commissions, and ad hoc committees you'd be interested in creating.
Thank you. I think Maddie had some really great ideas about that. Definitely, I would look forward to consulting her. I think the campus life is something that really needs to be looked into. But above all, the core answer to that question is this is something the Senate needs to sit down and talk about. What are the goals of this Senate? And what kind of committees does this particular Senate, not a single person in the Senate, speaker, what's this Senate believe that they want to talk about?
How will you assist senators like ourselves in terms of working to create legislation, hold committee hearings, and meet with our constituents?
It's a great question, Juan. One, I think the Senate needs to be a lot more transparent. I know I said I want to make freshmen not give up on the Senate. Also, people who are still holding on to faith in the student government and people who have lost faith. I think the Senate is the heart of how we can bring back that faith. I want to work one-on-one with every senator, and I want to work with each senator as a group. I will always be here to help in legislation writing. I will always be an advocate for what the Senate passes, and I will always encourage senators to go a little bit beyond their comfort level in being transparent, holding roaming office hours, being out there, talking to people, making sure people know that you are here for them. You are their first line of communication. I think that's really important. That's a great question.
Yeah, so you talked a lot about rules. So which specific rule or rules do you think are the most problematic, and how would you fix them?
So let's go beyond. So when we talk about parliamentary procedure and reform in rules and institutional change, a lot of the time you can go on and on, this rule, this rule, this rule, but we really need to talk about fundamental changes, overall large things. And I think one of the real core things that can be changed in the Senate is changing it from what is kind of what I would term an organizational model, a model that really focuses on procedures that a not-for-profit might use, that a private organization might use, and moving more to an individually oriented model, something that gives each individual senator a lot of influence in the Senate, so that when you add up all of that influence, it's well over 100%. Because we have to move beyond the mere majoritarian model. We represent constituents, so just having a simple majority support something, obviously that is the standard for a vote, but when it comes to the fundamental procedures of how we get to that vote, each individual senator needs to have a great deal of influence in having their voice heard, because it's not just their voice, it's a lot of senators' voices. So I would really like to talk offline about that, and that would definitely, thank you for that.
So Maddie and Trevor both gave presentations, and They both have a vast amount of experience in AU student government specifically. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on how you'll overcome not having that same experience if you were to be elected speaker, and how you'd work with how you'd be perceived among senators who already have been working in student government for years, and you'd be this newbie coming in. How would you overcome this?
It's definitely worth having someone outside of the student government bubble taking on a really important role in student government. And I have 6 seconds left, but I think I would definitely consult people, and I look forward to things.
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So we just had a new senator walk in. Does anyone want to make a motion to swear in the new senator so she can be a part of the debate discussion? Can we make a motion?
So moved.
Okay, second?
Second.
All right. You're gonna come down to the front, so swear you in so you can participate. Which district do you do? Okay. All right, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name, do solemnly swear that I will diligently and faithfully execute the duties and responsibilities of the office of senator for the class of 2019. The office of senator for that I will abide by the governing documents of the student government, and that I will work to my fullest abilities to promote the interests and welfare of the students of American University. Thank you. Okay. All right. More voices are always helpful. I'm getting a lot of help, so I appreciate y'all's patience.
You're really good.
So we're now going to move into a period of debate. Candidates above the room. Is there any discussion on the candidates? So we'll call three.
Thank you. I think that we're especially fortunate to have such qualified candidates, and I think that they would all do a great job. I think that Maddie is certainly right in that she brings a lot to the table in her knowledge, but I think that Trevor's experience as a senator, as being on the Finance Committee and the Governing Documents Committee, would really be a benefit to us. I think that Joyce's critique of previous senators in that they've made previous speakers and that they've made the role largely clerical is certainly valid in my experience having been a senator last year. And I think that Trevor saw that as well and would bring to the table a new perspective on being speaker and a new way, and would be able uniquely to help us achieve our policy initiatives.
I forgot to mention the rules before we started, but for bylaws, it's 2-minute speeches and no more than 2 speeches per question. So, Senator Zipson.
Yeah. So I agree with Senator Kenna that we have good candidates this year, although I have not been part of previous speaker elections, so it could be that case every year. But anyway, I was most impressed with Maddie's presentation today. Before today, Trevor was the only person to reach out to me in detail about what he intended to do as speaker. So on that basis, I was a little bit in his direction coming into it. But I think that the rigor and the detail of Maddie's presentation speaks to what kind of experience or action she would bring into the speakership. And on Trevor versus Maddie, with being a senator and not it is true that Trevor is the only candidate out of the three of them that has been a senator. And it could be, it's obviously conceivable that could bring some kind of unique experience that would aid someone in being a senator. And if someone else can articulate what that is, I would like to hear it. But so far, I've been thinking of it, and I can't think of like what instance or what knowledge Trevor would have as being a senator that Maddie would not, being a clerk and a speaker. And then on Joyce, he obviously knows a lot about rules. Oh, I'm sorry. She knows a lot about the rules of parliaments and student governments, but she also does not have any experience in student government at American University, and I worry that she might have a general familiarity with student governments, but that might not yet translate from her 1 year or 1 semester at American University into knowledge of AU student government.
Hi. I want to reiterate that this has been, we have amazing candidates this time, and I really look forward to like what they will do as speaker. And I just want to reiterate that I think there's a lot that comes from having a speaker that's been in your shoes before. So I know this is a really like fresh Senate this year, and having someone who's gone through a year of this, who has looked at documents, has created documents, and can like have that level of, I wouldn't say empathy, but kind of understanding of you is something to really look into.
So based on knowing a lot of you outside of AUSG and looking at everyone's campaigns and just like getting to know you since you've been senators-elect, I know that it's very clear that integrity is something that we value as the 13th Undergraduate Senate. And a lot of us, not only as senators, but members of the public, have expressed distaste in the petty drama of SG, and that's something that we all want to move past, and that's something that we don't want unnecessary drama. And I think that if you all value integrity like it all appears that we do, your vote today should be very clear that Maddie is the woman who would never in a million years sacrifice her integrity, her values, or her principles for petty drama, for politics, for power. And I think if you're looking for a person who will promise to give you power in exchange for a vote or for re-election or for some sort of position, Maddie's not the person who's going to do that. And I think that that's something we all need to value as members of the Senate. She's a woman who exemplifies what we're here to do and why we are in student government in the first place. She has an undying faith in the ability of us as students to make tangible change, and I think that she'll be an avenue for that. I think her impartiality is something that we need to value in this position. She places the rules that were put in front of her own petty biases, which she really doesn't have. She's honestly above all drama that I've ever seen, and I have massive respect for her for that. And re-electing Maddie will be re-electing someone with over 8 years of parliamentary procedure, not only reading it, but governing with it at the same time, not only in this body, but in multiple different bodies. She has an excellent relationship, as we've seen, with not only the executive board, but with student activities, with all of the avenues that she will utilize to help us reach out and expand our policy to enact real change in student government and at American University as a whole. And I think that if we value integrity like we all say that we do, and if the 13th Senate is serious about utilizing the full potential that we have, then Maddie is the person that we need.
I would like to echo the sentiments from Nancy. I think that Maddie is a great candidate. I think if we're talking about impartialness and integrity, as a candidate, Trevor, who ran for office, co-sponsored legislation with our policies with senators who are elected now. And so I think it's hard for him to separate that bias from running and also potentially being a speaker. So I think it's important to note that separation of the two. And I think that because Maddie doesn't have that, she'll be a great candidate with impartialness and integrity.
Yeah, I'd like to echo all of that, and I'd also like to remind everyone that as your role as speaker, not only are you supposed to be impartial, but you're also supposed to have some level of not necessarily activism, but advocacy for your senators or the body of individuals that you're representing as speaker to in some ways be more active members of Senate. So it is a demand that we're putting for each candidate who's running for the speakership to be an impartial individual. I came into this having really no partisanship with any candidate, but I think that when we're going to be casting our votes, we should look towards who has maybe more experience with already holding previous knowledge on legislation forming and just what maybe would be the responsibilities of a senator, but even more so, who would actually give a voice to what Senate holds. Because we don't want, like I guess how it was mentioned by Joyce, a clerical position. A lot of what we want to be putting forth in the 13th Senate is advocacy and telling the student body that, hey, we're here for you. And by any means and through any position in AUSG, we will be advocating. And this is not just a position for clerical work. But I mean, that's just what I took away from this entire session.
I would like to, again, agree with the sentiments that we have three very distinguished, qualified candidates who I think would all do an excellent job, and we're really blessed to have all of them here. I just found some things particularly interesting, especially that Maddie had said. I had not talked to Maddie before. I'm coming in here pretty new to everything, as are most of the new senators. And we all had talked about how we just wanted to get that impartiality when listening to everyone. And I found two things particularly interesting that Maddie said. She said it would be a very smooth transition. And I'm not doubting that it would be a smooth transition from Trevor or Joyce into that new speakership. But Maddie has that experience. She navigated what could have possibly been a constitutional crisis with Will's with the whole Will situation. I don't know how better to put it. And she navigated it perfectly from my objective lens. And then also Senator Hakami brought up the question of the ad hoc committees. And I found one of her ad hoc committees to be particularly interesting and not something that I had thought student government could have an influence on, which would be an ad hoc committee possibly on Greek life. I think a lot of freshmen come into AU with preconceived notions about Greek life in one way or the other, and they don't really understand. It's one of the least accessible, at least in my opinion as a freshman, it's one of the least accessible organizations at AU. And I think if AUSG could possibly play a hand in making that more accessible for every single person at AU and not just certain types of people, I think it would be a really interesting concept. I have no doubt that Trevor or Joyce would do a good job. I have no doubt that Trevor's voice in previous Senates would help us. But I do think that Maddie having that smooth transition and having these creative ideas would probably help us in the long run. And I think I'm leaning towards supporting her unless people can talk about Trevor's experiences or any other candidate's positivity towards bringing about change.
So I know both Maddie and Trevor from having been in Senate last year. I can't speak to Joyce so much. I'm sure he's wonderful in how I have. I apologize. She's wonderful. But I can tell you that when Trevor was first elected, he knew that he wanted to do a good job and to advocate on behalf of everyone in his constituency. And so he actually spent hours upon hours going through past Senate binders, reading all of past legislation to find out what is the role of Senate and what is it that we can do and accomplish working together. And I think that he brings that knowledge to the table. And I think that there is a lot to be said for impartiality, but I think that that's a parliamentary procedure term. And you have a speaker must be impartial in terms of who they call on in debate. But Maddie did bring up the point that bylaws require the speaker to help see through the advocacy agenda that we have passed in this body. And I think that Trevor's experience, having advocated on behalf of students before, uniquely allows him to do that on our behalf.
Right. So to echo some of the sentiments that Senator Kenna brought up, impartiality certainly is a parliamentary term. Frankly, I would like a speaker that is partial to certain types of legislation that he or she would like to push through. I think Trevor brought up an excellent point. He ran for Senate
just a couple weeks ago. Unfortunately, he did not win. However, I think that really speaks to his desire to lead and his desire to preside over a Senate that he knows can produce legislation that he is certainly partial to. And it's not partisan legislation. It's legislation that promotes certain types of advocacy that I know we all would like to see pushed through. So I think we should not be so candid throwing around the word impartiality, because we have to really decide what we want our speaker to be impartial towards, and then on the flip side, what we want them to be partial towards.
I think that the speaker, in a sense, certainly serves as the face of the undergraduate senate, and we've talked a lot about today about how we sometimes get a bad rap. And I think that what needs to change about the undergraduate senate, specifically the role of speaker, is that they take an active role in uniting the undergraduate senate as one body who believes in a certain set of policy initiatives that we are all committed to, that we're all passionate about, that we're all going to be effective and accountable towards putting forth legislation that addresses those issues. And I absolutely agree with the sentiments of Senator Hakami that impartiality is important in the sense that the speaker is not calling on certain people that he or she has personal relationships with, but impartiality in the sense of policy is not necessarily something to be frowned upon. There's a certain initiative that needs to be taken as the speaker to make the undergraduate senate more effective, and knowing the bylaws and impartiality are prerequisites and they're necessities, but they're not all that the speaker can do. There's so much more, and there's so much more potential for the position of speaker that I think that, in my personal opinion, that Trevor really could fill, because I think he sees the role of speaker as more than just knowing the bylaws, as more than just being impartial, but it's truly uniting the undergraduate senate and putting forth the student body a united senate position.
Thank you. So I actually want to address two very important concerns brought up by other senators on this issue. So the first thing I want to touch on is what Senator Dantzler mentioned. He said that because Trevor co-sponsored policy when he was campaigning, it's going to be hard for him to be impartial. And actually, I'd like to speak to that because I actually co-sponsored mental health policy with him. And I think that actually makes me more confident that he would make a good speaker, because not only does he understand the policy issues, but since he ran on the same exact things that all of us ran on, he has a vested interest and a proven record in wanting to advocate for those issues and ensuring that the Senate gets those things done. So I think that's actually a benefit and not a negative. The second thing was brought up by Senator Zitzman, who said that he wants something that distinguishes Senator Pugh's record and experience from Senator Wheeler's, Speaker Wheeler's. And I think the main thing, again, is just the policy expertise, because Trevor has actually written legislation. He's read through the binders. He goes above and beyond, right? I mean, as somebody who was a senator, he wasn't just looking at formatting and parliamentary procedure. He was looking at policy and seeing what things could actually work. So if I want a speaker that I can sit down with and write legislation with, and I want that person to know about the issues and know the proper and optimal policies to get our goals achieved. So I think, I'm going to be supporting Trevor, and I hope everyone else does too.
Yeah, I just kind of on the thread of this conversation, I would agree with that, just because also I have sponsored bills with Trevor in the past, and this is nothing to do with like what I believe personally. I even spoke with Maddie about a coalition, or not a coalition, but a commission for Greek life, because that's something we share in common. But I just want to kind of reiterate that working on legislation before in a Senate does not hurt your impartiality when you're speaking on people, because he actually has co-sponsored a lot of things that have been on people's platforms during this Senate election. So something that he worked with me personally on was making sure that we had a special committee for diversity and inclusion. He was my co-sponsor at that. So we both made headway in making sure that all students of all walks of life on this campus have a better voice for us and have better advocates here. And he's also been in great support of Senator Zitzman's bill on a call for better accessibility on this campus, which is obviously very needed and a very present issue. So if someone has a problem with someone who likes advocacy in the Senate or accessibility on this campus, you can speak up now. But I think that we want people that have goals for the Senate, and have people that know what these senators want from their platforms, can hold people accessible to their platforms, and make sure that we are a productive and cohesive unit.
So from what I'm getting from this debate, it's kind of like speaking on whether Maddie or whether Trevor is the best candidate. I think both of them have experience. I think what we're talking about now is saying that Trevor has more experience than Maddie because he did serve in our shoes. And I think that's really not the case. I think both of them working together in the previous 12th undergraduate Senate, both of them have experience. Maddie just has a little bit more of serving in the role of Speaker of the undergraduate Senate, but I think what makes her the best candidate, which is why I'm supporting her today, is that she did not ever have any type of experience in student government, did not run before, did not support any candidates during this election. She did not run an election and lost an election. And I feel like as Speaker of the Undergraduate Senate, it has to be someone that is representing the whole student body that can be impartial and not have any type of biases towards the executive board, because like all of the candidates were saying, we do have to work with the executive board to get a lot of policies done, because the Senate has to work with the executive board. And I just feel like Maddie being impartial will be able to do such because she has no relationship, whether it's good or bad, with the executive board. And I think it also comes down to just, I wouldn't even say lack of experience, because that's what really is coming down to. People are saying, well, Trevor has more experience because he's had proposals, he's passed legislation, but Maddie has also been at the forefront, being there at those meetings, talking about this legislation. And she said in her speech that she will help with proposals, help with senators as well.
I would just like to clarify that I don't think the rhetoric today that is being said is in line with who has more or less experience in the position, but what kind of take they hold with the experience that they already have. I think arguably both Trevor and Maddie have equal levels of experience, just in different ways. And I would really like to, everyone noticed that I kept asking the question of what kind of committees, commissions, and ad hoc committees would be presented. And this is really important because from what I heard from Trevor's point, from Trevor, is that he created a special committee on diversity, equity, and inclusion. That didn't exist. It was just a special committee on finance. So if we're really, from what I've honestly just experienced today and how I formulated my own standing from this candidate speaking, if we're really adamant about bringing racial equality or ending bias-related incidences on campus, take into consideration that we had someone who created a special committee with Senator Pintar about diversity, equity, and inclusion. From when I ran my campaign, we had a Google Forms, and that was an issue that was on everyone's mind: is can we heal racial tensions on campus? We have a candidate who's literally created, and I want to repeat, a special commission on diversity, equity, inclusion. This is not impartiality. This is not being super partisan during any of our Senate meetings. This is somebody who's actually taking an active role in advocating for something that is not a partisan issue. It's either you're with, ending racism on campus, or you're against it. And this is honestly how I'm just formulating my own take on who I'd be voting for.
I think, to echo what all the senators have been saying, it's really what boils down to it is, to what degree of activism do we want to see in into our speaker? And that's the biggest question I think that we're trying to ask. When we look at Maddie, she is impartial in the sense that she won't be there to really be as active as a speaker. She will be there to direct us to where we need to go, but most of the blunt force for us to do our work will be on us. It will be us who has to do that. But there is Trevor also there. If it was Trevor, he would be the one who would actually be going out, and he will be telling you, what are you doing? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? And I think that is better, because that one can be checked. It can be checked in the sense that if you don't like what he's saying, you're able to go against it. You're able to say, no, that's not what I want to. And I think that empowers senators to do more of the role that they're supposed to do. And as a personal opinion, I do think that Trevor is a much better speaker, in the sense that he is a change. He is one big thing is that it's a change from what we had before, but he's also still taking the lessons what we've learned from Maddie and still incorporating that into his as speaker.
I'm a bylaw junkie and a governing document junkie. So I just want to read section 3, section 2 of the bylaws titled impartiality, because there's some debate on like what that actually means. So this is the section that whoever's elected speaker will have to go by, like by their job. And I'm just going to read it out loud. So it says, the speaker shall act with impartiality in all matters coming before the Senate, except when able to cast a vote. The speaker shall be obligated to speak on behalf of all legislation after its passage and convey it to the relevant departments and organs of the student government. And I think that's exactly what Maddie says that she intends to do with her role. And I think it's awesome that everyone's really excited about the option for a speaker to advocate for us. But the bylaws say that they have to act with impartiality until that legislation is passed. So I think the way that everyone wants all of this advocacy to happen can happen, but I think the way that everyone expects this to happen is not going to happen in that way, because it's not allowed to happen based on the governing documents and the way that the speaker has to do his or her job. So I think that when we consider this, we need to think about the person who, because both of them have the exact same amount of experience, like they started at the same time, they've been to the same number of meetings. But I think we need to think about who has the experience and who would be able to run these meetings efficiently and allow Senate to work in the way that it is supposed to and the way that it can.
Just a reminder, all senators may speak twice for a duration of 2 minutes each. We're keeping a tally. Senator.
So first, I want to extend a little bit of nuance off of what the previous senator said into what partiality is allowed and what partiality isn't, because it is not as simple as just the speaker must be impartial or the speaker must be partial. The speaker must be impartial on matters of policy that the Senate creates, and the speaker should be partial on making the Senate work well as an institution, the institutional issues, and also on issues of policy that the Senate has already decided. So with that said, there are issues that senators want to work on. That's policy where the senator, or where the speaker rather, should be impartial according to the bylaws. That's not to say that the speaker doesn't care about those policy issues or doesn't want to see action happen, but rather that it's all of your jobs to actually make the policy happen. It's not the speaker's job. The speaker is an institutional facilitator. And then on the matter of experience, all of our candidates today have a familiarity with rules, and Trevor and Maddie in particular have experience with AUSG. Neither of them is really lacking in that regard. So I think what the difference would come down to is just the level of work that they put into it, because they're both applying their familiarity with AUSG and putting just straight raw effort into producing a well-functioning Senate. So it really comes down to which candidate you believe will do the most work as Speaker and will be the most rigorous and thorough.
I would just like to express I have similar sentiments toward as Senator Zitzman does. The Speaker is supposed to be the chief facilitator, at least in my opinion. Their job is to conduct these meetings, to help us get our agenda out once we pass it. But it's not for them to actually legislate. And while they can help make these committees, and while they can help us craft this legislation, it's not their job to legislate. So I think whichever way you decide to vote, I think it's important to take that into consideration. I think the expertise that either of these candidates draws upon will help us in different aspects. But I honestly think that the smooth transition is something that is not being taken into consideration enough. And I think that Maddie will do a great job in creating this smooth transition where we all of us, all the class of 2021 senators, all these new senators, we all have these large campaign goals to get student government working again. And I think Maddie's smooth transition will help us get right into that. And her knowledge of how these committees work from that side of the table will help us get right into legislating instead of having to deal with almost training a new candidate from that side. I understand that Trevor has a lot of experience. Trevor met with me. I really appreciated him meeting with me, and I think he'll do a great job if he is elected. But I think Maddie's expertise from that side of the bench will ultimately help us get our agenda out in a quicker and more efficient way.
So I think from what I'm getting also from the second half of the debate is that the speaker's job, I believe, is to not promote their own agenda, but to help promote our agenda. I think to go on to the point that Senator Hakami made, saying that Trevor was the person that kind of helped to create this committee with Senator Pintar. But I think also we have to look at what Maddie's perspective and role was in it. Like she said in her speech, is that she did help to bring in President Dumpson to kind of talk about it because President Dumpson did like the wording of the legislation. And to have President Dumpson come in and speak to the senators and actually have a discussion about this is what we're now also getting from that point of view. And also the committee was in the previous Senate. It was an ad hoc committee, then moved to a special committee. If we really wanted to be a committee that will be here for every single session of the Senate, it should honestly be a standing committee. I also have another point that I made previously. Maddie has run the Senate with almost all the senators gone. Attendance has been lack of in the Senate. And she's basically run the Senate session without quorum being met. And through that, we will have a constitutional crisis like Senator Politsky had mentioned and Tanner mentioned. But can we really say that Trevor will possibly do the same? It should come down, honestly, to who has a relevant experience, not who the experience that we like, and who we will say is our friends.
Will brought up to me that if there are any senators that do not wish to speak, they can, I guess, I don't know what the official term is, but transfer their speaking time to other senators. So there's several of you that have already spoken twice each, so you can communicate with your fellow senators that may not wish to speak, but please remain considerate of those that are speaking.
I have a point of inquiry.
Yeah, sure.
Can we move to give the senators unlimited speaking rights in debate?
No, it's per bylaws. Okay. So that's something that if this is frustrating, consider amending bylaws.
Point of inquiry, that transfer bit is also in the bylaws.
It doesn't say anything, but this is my interpretation as chair of J board.
Okay.
This is my interpretation. You guys can. Does anybody have any issue with that?
Point of inquiry?
Sure.
How would a senator that hasn't spoken yet transfer their speaking rights to another senator?
Yeah, it's a motion.
Okay.
So I would assume that it would make sense for the senator that would wish not to speak to say that they move to transfer their speaking time to another certain senator. That makes sense. All right.
Sure, point of inquiry. I don't know if this is even the term for this, but can somebody transfer their speaking rights to me? I just have like one. Please.
You can have mine.
Oh, thanks, Tanner.
But also senators that don't wish to speak don't feel like you have to transfer your power over. Nobody can make you do that. So, with that, is there any further discussion?
So I make a motion to transfer my speaking time to Senator Cannon.
So someone has made the motion.
I thought so. Oh, okay. My bad.
I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Jeff.
All right.
Now they just do it.
All right. Sure.
So
You want your
next,
speaking rights now?
yeah, sure. Thanks.
All right, so yeah, you have 2 minutes. I apologize for the interview. Just trying to be professional.
You're doing a great job, Stephanie. On to the topic at hand. As a senator last year and as chairman of the ad hoc committee on governing documents last semester, I can speak to both Maddie and Trevor in saying that they would both do a great job. They both have relevant experience and they both would make great speakers. There's been a question raised about relationship with the executive board. And I think that we have to all recognize that we're all students and we're all working to advocate for students. And so I think that we'd want a positive relationship with the executive board so that we can all advocate. But at the same time, part of our responsibility is to oversee those activities that the stipended executives of AOSG see what they're doing. And I think that Trevor, having been in our shoes, having been a senator before, brings that oversight knowledge to the table that as clerk and speaker, Maddie might not have. True, she has worked with the executive in the past, but I think that, as Trevor mentioned, he would bring a fresh start. And I think if we are the majority of the senators in this room are new senators and want to change the culture of AOSG, they should be looking more favorably upon a fresh start in terms of the speakership. And I think we're talking about activism as well. And I think that, we're all activists in the sense that we bring policy ideas and objectives to the table that we want to see followed through upon their passage in this body. And I think that both Maddie and Trevor are passionate and would do a good job, but I am inclined to support Trevor given his experience in the past as an activist in our shoes.
Yes,
Sorry, I do need the.
Sure,
motion.
yeah, I motion to give her a minute of my speaking time.
Great, thank you, sorry.
Thanks, Dana. I actually came into this meeting totally nonpartisan. I really just wanted to hear what everyone had to say. Actually, right now I'm still a little bit torn because, as everyone's kind of stated, they both do bring very interesting levels of experience, and arguably they're both, it's beneficial in two different ways. I would like to, I guess, just list off what would be the greater aspects of voting for each. Even Joyce, I think we're not really talking about Joyce, and I think Joyce does bring an interesting take to the speakership role as well. With Maddie, I think that her experience as a parliamentarian is great. Same with Joyce. I think Maddie's experience as speaker the last term and how she conducted herself at the hearing is phenomenal. With Trevor, I think that he brings an interesting perspective of having been senator previously and knowing what it's like conducting Senate hearings. But also that speaks again to Maddie. I like the fact that Trevor and Sophia were able to create the special commission on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I also like how Maddie was able to talk to exec about that. But I think as far as today, we should be taking into consideration who, like Senator Zitzman brought onto the table, who would be able to dedicate the majority of their time to this position. And for that, if anyone would be willing to really express a notion either way, because for that term, I'm fairly torn because I think each person is willing to, contribute as much of their time as I can tell.
Right, so I think if you juxtapose Trevor and Maddie, you see Maddie as someone who is certainly qualified. I think that's something we can all agree on. But I don't like the image, I suppose, of the speaker as an overbearing parent that has to control the Senate. I like the image of a speaker who, albeit impartial, is an advocate for the Senate and is willing and capable to move it forward on legislation that is not partisan, but rather is agreed upon and widely supported. So no, obviously nothing against Maddie at all. Clearly, I wasn't in the Senate last year, but very obviously she had done a great job and was an excellent facilitator and was a great presiding officer. However, I'm very much inclined to support Trevor, as I believe the two are more or less equal in terms of experience and ability to preside over this body. But I believe Trevor will transform the role, as the role is malleable. And I think it deserves to be transformed. And I'm willing and able to take that risk, I suppose, of electing a new speaker. I'm willing to embark upon that challenge to acclimate him to this role with you all, with my fellow senators, as I believe it is much more important to elect someone that we believe will transform the role of the speaker as well as transform the Senate itself, because Lord knows it needs some change. And I don't think that we should be putting all our eggs in one basket, so to speak, on the comfort of electing someone who's been in it before.
Hi, I would like to make a motion to yield my last point to Nancy.
Yeah, I want to bring up, because Yasmin's point about the Standing Committee on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion was super important. And just like watching that piece of legislation get passed was actually like a transformative moment for me, just sitting there as the clerk, because it showed me the importance of collaboration in the Senate, because that bill would not have gotten passed had this collaboration between the Senate and the executive board not been in place. Because Taylor went into the meeting expecting that she was going to veto the bill because there was language in it that she didn't support or that she didn't think would be helpful. So Maddie said, okay, don't veto it. Come and allow the Senate to do what it's supposed to do. Allow us to sit in this room and debate this bill and do our job so that this committee can be put in place. So I totally agree that that's something that needs to be put in the forefront of the Senate. And it wouldn't be if Maddie had not utilized her power as a speaker and her positive relationship with the executive board. And I think that's something that we need to consider, because we know with Maddie that the executive board will collaborate with us and we will be able to use our power and our oversight with them in a positive way. And I don't know if we can get that with Trevor. And then additionally, Andrew's brought up the point of transition, so many times. And I think it's very important. Maddie stayed in Washington, D.C. over the summer, where we live, in the summer with Noah training, and she helped him write the book on being the speaker and running the Senate, and like she knows this like the back of her hand, and I think that's not something that we should overlook. And then I just think that it's so important that we emphasize the collaboration, emphasize the work that she's put in now. And as far as commitments that were brought up, Maddie will dedicate all of the time that she can to this role in order to make it the best it can be. She does it now. She will continue to do it. Trevor is great. I've worked with him in a lot of different capacities, be it like socially with RHA, with Senate. But I think that his commitments, I know he said there was only 1 or 2 hours, but like.
That's time.
Thank you. So I might be missing something here, but to address what the previous senator just mentioned, I don't see any reason why we can't trust Trevor to work with the e-board as well. And furthermore, if anyone can elaborate on that, I'm glad to hear it, but I don't see any reason for him to be unable to collaborate with the e-board. And furthermore, on the issue of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, I want to make it very clear that, the initiative that Trevor had and that Sophia had to begin and to start that process was equally as important, if not more important, than the internal politics of, talking with the e-board, et cetera. So I think, we do really have to consider again that, this is someone who has the initiative. He has a proven record of having the initiative to get things done, and he will, he will be impartial per the bylaws, but he will still make sure that the Senate is being active. There's a great difference between active and advocating for one policy or another, and I think that Trevor's going to do a great job in terms of keeping the Senate active. And again, I don't see a reason for us to distrust his ability to collaborate with the e-board. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Motion to give my speaking rights to Senator Pintar.
Sure. Or did you?
Oh yes, I would. Thanks. Yeah, so I just with what's been said, I think this is really good debate, and I really appreciate like how much thought everyone's putting in to this, because it's obviously such an important role in what we do. I would definitely like to commend the speaker right now, that she did stand up for my bill and like talk to President Dumpson about coming in and working on the legislation. However, just in general, I think President Dumpson should have just came in and talked about it anyway. I don't think she needed a reminder from the speaker that that's what she should have done in the first place. I think that, and this is also, I just want to elaborate, just for context of people who don't know, that process was actually a huge, project that the chair of diversity and inclusion, actually before me, was working on so hard last semester, and who's now part of President Dumpson's cabinet now, and was a huge, widely popular movement in the Senate. So I think that can be a whole other conversation. But I just want to say, I don't think that it's bad that Trevor's a new face coming into this new body. And I think that we also want someone who's not only can work with them, but can stand up
to the administration when they think something is unfit.
I just have a point of inquiry. I was wondering who the current parliamentarian is for. Okay, because like this is my speaking time. I just wanted to make the comment that by how I view it, I feel like Maddie would be a better parliamentarian, to be honest. Because I feel like Maddie is like, she understands the governing documents and she understands what is happening, especially like the rules of debate and what's happening. And so I feel like that Trevor would be able to exercise what he wants to do as speaker, but at the same time, Maddie's there as a check. And I think that's something that has to do with us and the executive, executive board. But like, it's just as a personal opinion. I just think that Maddie would be better as a parliamentarian than that.
I'd like to make a motion to transfer my speaking time to Nancy if she needs it.
Okay. I mean, I'll take it if you're giving it. Yeah, the point about parliamentarian, I think that's a great point. However, I think that would be a waste of Maddie's talents, to be honest. I think if we're talking about parliamentarian, Joyce is the obvious choice for that. Hence the fact that he's come into multiple I'm so sorry. She has come into multiple Senate meetings and talked about the importance of having a parliamentarian. I think Maddie would be great, but I think that she is so much more suited to this role than she would be to a parliamentarian. I guess I don't have anything else to say, but thank you.
Okay, well,
Has someone?
yeah, if you want to transfer me something, otherwise I'll be quiet. But I have used my two.
Sure, I'll transfer my last.
Thank you.
Speaking time to you.
Can you click at it and you make a motion? It's for.
Sure, yeah, I motion to transfer my other speaking time to.
Thank you, we're all learning.
Thank you. Just one more thing from me. I think an issue at the beginning of every Senate is that we come in with a lot of buzzwords in our head, but you need to start transferring those into specifics because when you get down to it, the work of student government is just a bunch of paper form jujitsu. So you really need to think in specifics. And a lot of this debate has been governed instead by buzzwords. So when we talk about advocacy from the speaker, no one has actually said what they imagine that being in terms of like signing a form or talking to an official. So what does that mean each of our two main candidates to advocate for your legislation to pass? As far as I can see, both of them have the same specific approach to doing that because they both talked about wanting to have a document that lists your specific legislative agendas and using that document to check in on you and making sure the Senate does its job. And then an issue where I've seen no specifics but a lot of buzzwords talked about is transforming the role of the speaker, the culture of the undergraduate Senate. So I would just challenge you all to think, like, when you want a speaker to do any of those things, what do you actually think that looks like? And then cross-reference that with what the candidates set up there and see if you can find any specifics in your head of what you want that action to look like and any specifics from those candidates' presentations to see if they match up.
Point of inquiry.
Sure.
Do we have to make a motion to move into voting, or do we just move into voting once speakers have all left?
Once there is no more discussion, we move into voting by secret paper.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Motion to transfer my speaking time to Yasman.
I actually have two final points, and then I'll just let everyone else kind of contribute. The first one is I think a lot of people actually address a lot of what Senator Zitzman said as well in the second point. But in the first one, I think a lot of people have been basing this conversation off of assumptions, and arguably so. I think that is an incorrect approach because we don't really know, right? We're just walking in with the assumption that that so-and-so may be better at the role than so-and-so. And this is kind of not really productive by any means, this conversation, because we're just going off of just hearsay in that respective. I think in terms of what Senator Zitzman is proposing, I think when we look at the proposed committees and commissions from each candidate, I mean, we have, for example, Trevor talking about how he really wants to focus on a ad hoc commission or committee on student advocacy. And this goes to saying the buzzword, you know, advocacy, what does that really mean? And he explicitly states that it'll be in terms of, you know, creating a better dialogue and providing insight on how to pass legislation in regards to anti-hate, creating a more secure campus. I mean, he can really be saying all this stuff right now. And then in terms of Speaker Wheeler, she is apparently proposing a commission or committee on Greek life. And I think that actually also has like a very interesting facet to provide us as well. I think that in terms of what I'd like to see, and I mean, anyone can echo or, you know, disagree on this, as a speaker, I would like for that speaker to really motivate all of us to maintain all passion in our jobs. I don't want to see, you know, sometime in February or March, people not showing up or people not being involved in Student Senate because all of a sudden you have other kinds of requirements or plans, or all of a sudden you don't really feel like showing up anymore. That's not okay. We need a leader who holds us accountable, makes sure that we show up. And quite frankly, I'm not really arguing for either candidate because I think that they both be perfectly fine for this. But that goes towards my original point: who is willing to dedicate more time? And I think that's where the conversation should be right now, because we're just basing all of, you know, our information on hearsay and assumptions, which is really not beneficial at all, because, you know, how are we supposed to talk on somebody else's behalf that's not really in the room? So that's just my last take.
Is there any further discussion? All right, would anyone like to make well, actually, we will proceed to voting on the candidates by secret ballot without objection.
Might have been clear. Do we have to do secret ballot? Is that part of the bylaws?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome.
Oh, yes, I am, Senator. Sorry.
Yeah. We don't know if it's senator.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Can you just take like a couple minutes? Thank you. Okay. I always feel bad for people when they don't use the reference. I wanted to ask.
Thanks.
No, I understand. I'm voting for Dante
Writing campaign. No, thank you. Been there, done that, my friend. You know, I've had the experience, really? You're always here. About a year.
Bernie Sanders.
I know, someone probably advocated that.
I keep ballots.
Yes.
I like that.
If you want to book it for every meeting, like, I'm joking.
It's like how they do.
We could, but
It's right in Paul Ryan.
we don't need a special person.
And then I realized I was gonna stop and I was like, I have so much more to
I was selected as highly selected.
like the little hitters. I like. Yeah, I know. Oh my gosh. Water.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, I don't know. I was in the 12th Senate. Like, I don't watch. Yeah, sure. Or I'm sure. Did I miss anybody? Does anybody not know? Speaking their head.
No, I'm not a big deal anymore.
I'm not going.
I'll say something. Yeah. Is that here?
Memories.
Where's the?
No, I mean, I don't relate.
Wait, what? Oh, I know.
A large part of the position. I think as long as somebody just knows their shit.
Yeah.
I don't think it's like, it's really a toss up. I don't think.
Why the politicizing this one is exactly what AUSG like politics. I'm like,
No flag. We didn't know about that.
Please do.
okay.
Yeah, you see, I removed myself. I mean, anyone near the votes. What? It is? Or, yeah. Out of due respect for him. It's really, really difficult.
What is the process?
Oh, yeah. I like it.
Okay.
26.
I won't.
Oh my God, that was too much. Put on the screen and everything. Do you remember when Gabe was playing Kansas City baseball on the? Oprah, and like he crashed down and be like, interesting thought, like terrible.
If you guys want to talk, just know.
I'm so.
They were the good days.
But these days are better.
I just got
opportunity to be helpful. Nice, you know. I did it and I regret it.
It's a good chance.
Oh, okay.
It's on my part. I just didn't want to kind of like, inappropriate,
That told me 1 hour. I was like, oh, great. I'm not leaving. That's awkward. I've been here this long. I need to see it.
I know, it's like I've already had this.
Exactly. Tom, you owe me Chick-fil-A.
All right.
Chipotle.
Okay, so in a vote of 11 for Trevor Pugh, to 9 for Maddie Wheeler, to 0 for Joyce DeSurse, Trevor Pugh will be the Speaker of the American University Student Government. 11 to 9 to 0. So,
Thank
so we will swear in the new speaker.
Yeah.
So please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name, do solemnly swear
I, Trevor Pugh, do solemnly swear
that I will diligently and faithfully
that I will diligently and faithfully
execute the duties and responsibilities
execute the duties and responsibilities
of the office of Speaker to the Undergraduate Senate,
of the office of Speaker to the Undergraduate Senate,
that I will abide by the governing documents
that I will abide by the governing documents
of the student government,
of the student government,
and that I will work to my fullest abilities
and I will work to my fullest abilities
to promote the interests and welfare
to promote the interests and welfare
of the students of American University.
of the students of American University. I'll give a quick, I'll give thank you to all the senators that voted for me. I really look forward to what we can accomplish this year, and hopefully you'll entrust me with my experience last year to help push you forward. This upcoming week, there's going to be a lot going on. We're going to establish standing committees, and then we're offering up rules of debate and decorum, which comes up next week very quickly. We're also going to do the Senate retreat, I know, that's coming up next week, correct?
December 2nd.
Oh, December 2nd, okay.
Or 3rd, it's that Sunday.
Okay, perfect. So be ready for that. I look forward to really representing you guys, and let's make this much better than our 12th Senate. Thank you.
We will now move to the good of the order. Does any member of the Senate or student government wish to speak at this time? Senator Pintar.
Hi, if you guys haven't talked to me, I'm Sophia Pintar. I just also want to make it known that because we have such a fresh Senate this year, which is fantastic. I really look forward to working with all of you. I am also the new Dean of the Undergraduate Senate, so that means my job basically is to make sure everyone who's new understands how to make a bill, the proper language, language and parliamentary order. And I just want you to know, like, if you just have any questions for me in general, like, please come talk to me. Not just office hours, like, let's work, like, we'll coordinate schedules, coordinate calendars, my favorite thing. And I just really want the learning curve for everybody to be as short as possible so we can all work on the really lofty projects we really are looking forward to working on. And I would also just like to make a point in saying, just like in this past Senate election, if you just looked at everybody's platform, there was such immense overlap. So, shocker, if we all had the same ideas, we should all work together to make that happen. And we all have these goals that Senate can do, but it doesn't work when everyone's trying to do it with just by putting their name on it, if that makes sense. So we can't just have several bills or just one person working on one project. The success of the Senate relies on cooperation with other people. So I just really look forward to talking with you, to collaborating with you, and making sure that we have much more progress and much more tangible progress for this campus. Thank you.
So in case you haven't met me yet, I'm Andrew Polinsky, class of 2021 senator. I'm looking forward to working with all of you. I just wanted to use my time, I know we all have a lot of things to do, just to say congratulations to Trevor, and also to Maddie and Joyce. You guys both brought up great ideas that I think we're all going to use in the upcoming Senate, and we look forward to consulting with you guys so your ideas can come out and so we can make the Senate better. And we also look forward to working with our new speaker in order to making sure that this is a very functioning body that actually gets things done for once. And I hope that we can get rid of this preconceived notion amongst the student body that the Senate doesn't do anything. And I hope we can work to making actual positive change that will reflect in the lives of everyone every day, and so that everyone on campus is better off by the actions of what we do.
First and foremost, I wanted to thank Maddie Wheeler for her constant and endless service in a very difficult job. She was extremely good at it. There's high turnover for a reason, and you stuck with it and you were good at it, and we all owe you a debt because of that. I also wanted to echo what Sophia said. I would love to work with any single senator that has any interest in working with any of the stuff that Case is going to be doing for the year. A few of you have reached out to me already, and I appreciate that. Know that any of you can do that. I'd love to do that. I'd love for you to come to my office hours. If you feel more comfortable, I can reach out to you, whatever is more effective, but I'm very excited, especially to get to work with a lot of the new senators. So looking forward to the year.
I do want to add something. As chair of judicial board, we're not really a secret thing, but we don't get talked to a lot, we don't socialize. But we are a resource of myself and then my 4 associate members who are amazing and know everything there is to know about the bylaws and stuff like that. And I'm learning slowly but surely. So we are here as a resource to field any judicial or parliamentary inquiries that you may have about how student government works or about how somebody is fulfilling the duties of their position, basically. So there's a place on the AUSG website to submit an inquiry, and that goes straight to me if you have any questions. So we've already been fielding a few different inquiries, and if those move forward, you'll be hearing about them in Senate meetings. But again, like, we're here as a resource. If you have questions about how things should be run or what people are doing, it's there just under like judicial boards, submit an inquiry. It's all good. So yeah, is there anybody else for good of the order?
All right, so I'm Bobby Zitzman. Last time I represented the campus at large, and I represent the class of 2019. And I want to say everything as well that Senator Pintar said, except that I'm not the Dean of the Senate. But in any case, you can still talk to me like you can talk to her. And also, the president's not here, but I hope that she nominates a parliamentarian soon because we need one still. And I also hope that Joyce DeSerce hasn't withdrawn her application to become parliamentarian.
Hi, everyone. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Cheyenne. I am the Senate Student Activities Advisor. Those of you that have worked with me the last year, awesome, welcome back. And those of you that are just starting, congratulations. I'm really looking forward to working with you. We're going to have a lot of things going on this year, but I think it's going to be a really successful Senate, which is really exciting. And we will talk more about what the vision is of Senate from what me and Trevor talk about and sort of what me and Maddie talked about to kind of continue on when we have the retreat in December. Congratulations again.
Hi, everyone. Chris again, Secretary of ASG. I'm representing the E-Board and congratulating Trevor. We're excited to work with him. I think today, and we thank Maddie for her service over the past this semester. Excuse me. I think the debate today was really good. It was really substantive. It didn't really get to a point of overexhaustion, which I think is really important, and that's something that you came out right out of the gate with, which is really surprising and really exciting. So it can only get really better from here. I just have like one super extremely important comment. This happened a couple times during debate. I think it's extremely important as like student representatives and as like people, as people are watching the live stream, members of the public are here to use correct pronouns. I know a lot of the times it's not done intentionally. Hopefully it's never done intentionally, but it still makes an impact, and it's extremely important that you do that. So I just wanted to make that point. I know we all strive to be the best versions of ourselves, and that's part of it. At 3:30, so in an hour from now, Teach for America is presenting AUSG members with a LinkedIn workshop in this room, and there's going to be free pizza. So I would encourage you to stick around. A lot of you probably live on campus. I would encourage you to stick around, get some free pizza, and they're going to bring your resume, and they're going to show you the best ways to plug in your resume into LinkedIn. Whether you have a LinkedIn or you don't, if you don't, it's super important to have as a college student. And if you do, I know I'm going to be there because I don't know if I'm doing the correct best practices, even as a communicator. So stick around 3:30 in this room. And I will probably be requesting Senate to move money for the Thanksgiving thing that I talked about earlier. because there's currently a large chunk of money sitting in capital maintenance that's not, I know is not going to be used in a capital maintenance fashion. So next Sunday, expect, or how do, who's been on finance committee? Okay, if I submit it during the week, can they meet before Senate on Sunday?
Sunday?
Before next Sunday?
Well, we haven't established the finance.
Oh, we haven't established a committee yet.
Yeah.
There needs to be
So
elections for that.
is Senate able to do it without finance?
Are you able, sorry, what
So
was the question?
next Sunday, would Senate, without its finance committee, be able to move money?
So anybody can move money via a directive. So yes, somebody just has to write a directive.
Yeah.
And a directive can move money. It only passes with a majority. It only requires one reading. Super easy directives.
So we wouldn't need the finance committee for that,
No, it'd be good, but like,
since it doesn't exist.
as long as, like, cause your thing is like super not controversial. Like nobody's gonna be like, oh, people shouldn't be able to eat over Thanksgiving.
Okay, so just expect more details about that during this week as we lock down restaurants and hopefully finalize this activities and with other people in the UFG and RHA. It would probably, just to put it out there, it would probably be $1,000 to $2,000 moving from capital maintenance to some account that is easily accessible, like my account. Thank you.
Anyone else want to go to the order?
Yeah, I just also want to say that if you don't know, from 5 to 9 tonight, the class of 2020 council is doing a Chipotle fundraiser. So go and support the class of 2020 because they are the most active council right now. And I mean, it's Chipotle, so.
Anything else for go to the order? Any further business? There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned. You all-
Great job.